continue now at the top of Daf Yud and Meseches Beitzah. This is Beitzah Daf 12b. And the previous summit, the Gemara had a case. Let's say a person is mevashel gid, is mevashel the sciatic nerve in cholav, and you do that on yontiv and you eat it. So then you get 5 sets of malchus. And the last set is mishum havara, for lighting a fire, as Rashi over here says. Mishum havara shimulacha liatzma. That's an independent melacha, meaning that's aside from bishul. You have bishul on yontiv and you also have havara on yontiv. V'kasavar, this Tana holds yesh chiluk melachas liyontiv, that you can have distinct melachas on yontiv lilko shtayim, that you can get 2 sets of malchus, meaning 1 for bishul and 1 for havara, al shtei melachas mishum yontiv. Even if you have 2 separate melachas that are both yontiv, still you get 2 separate sets of malchus. So in any case, those were the 5 sets of malchus that you get for this case of mevashel gid b'cholav on yontiv and eating it. So Amar Lei, so Rabbi Yochanan said back when he heard this teaching, Pok Tani Levra, he told this Amora, go teach it outside of here. This is not accurate. Why? Because Havara ubishul ain't a Mishnah. Because you're listing Havara and Bishul. You're saying the person gets Malchus for Havara and Bishul, and that's not true. Rashi over here says, Havara ubishul di yomtiv ain't a Mishnah lilkos alein. You're not going to get Malchus for that. To mitoch shehutru litzorech, because since you're allowed to do Havara and Bishul litzorech ochel nefesh, hutru nami shelo litzorech minat Torah. So you say mitoch that it's also going to be allowed even if it's shelo litzorech. So over here it's true you're not going to be eating this because it's not kosher, but mitoch shehutru litzorech, hutru nami shelo litzorech, and therefore you're not going to get Malchus for the Havara and the Bishul. V'yim timtzalom Mishnah, and if you're going to say that this was taught one time, Beis Shammai, that's just Beis Shammai who would say that. The Amri lo amrina mitoch hotzah letzorech, hotzah nami shelo letzorech, because Beis Shammai says we don't say mitoch by hotzah. We don't say that since hotzah, carrying in Rosh Hashanah is allowed letzorech, therefore it's allowed shelo letzorech. So achanami. So here also, when it comes to havara to bishul, lo amrina mitoch shehutra havara letzorech hotzah nami shelo letzorech. We do not say that just because havara is allowed letzorech that it should also be allowed shelo letzorech. Di Beis Hillel, because if it were Beis Hillel, kevan da amri mitoch shehutra hotzah letzorech hotzah nami shelo letzorech. Since Beis Hillel say that mitoch, that hotzah is allowed letzorech, it's also allowed shelo letzorech. Hachanami, here also mitoch shehutra havara letzorech hotzah nami shelo letzorech. Because havara is allowed letzorech, it's also allowed shelo letzorech. Rashi over here says Eina Mishnah means lo nishnas me'olam beveis hamedrash. Such a teaching has never been taught in the Beis Medrash. V'im timsalom our Mishnah, and if you say it was taught, im yormu tanoim shenishnas vade Beis Shammai shanu. If it was taught, then it can only be Beis Shammai. In any case, the point of the Gemara is to prove that Rabbi Yochanan also agrees that the real machlokas, the explanation of our Mishnah, the real machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai is whether or not we say mitoch. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah. Beis Shammai omrim, Beis Shammai say, ein molichin chalo matanos lekohen b'yontiv. You're not allowed to take this, when you separate challah, you're supposed to bring it to the Kohen. You can't bring it to the Kohen on Yontiv. You also can't bring matanos. This refers to the zroa and the lechayim and the keva, which are the parts of the animal that are given to the Kohen. So you're not allowed to bring these things to the Kohen on Yontiv. Bein shehurmu me'emesh, whether you separated them from yesterday, from before Yontiv. Bein shehurmu mehayom, or whether you separated them today on Yontiv. In either case, you're not allowed to bring them to the Kohen. Beis Hillel matir, and Beis Hillel say that it's mutter. Rashi over here says, ein molichin chala, afa bishem mutter b'hafrashasa. Now, even though you're allowed to separate chala on Yontiv, lo sharu leholachasa, you're not allowed to bring it to the Kohen. Elatikon l'saken isaso hitiru lo v'lo yoser. The reason they allowed you to separate the chala was because you have to fix the dough, because you're allowed to bake on Yontiv. So therefore, the only way you could eat it is if you separate the chala. That they allowed. But to do anything more than that, like to bring it to the Kohen, is going to be a problem. Matanos hazroa v'halachayim v'akeva. Again, the parts of the animal, the zroa, the lachayim, and the keva. Afhein haramosan hutralo. Those also you're allowed to separate them on Yontiv. Shaharein itztave loharima. There's a command to separate them. Ve'echyochal shar habasar. You won't be able to eat the rest of the meat if you don't separate. Ve'ava b'shein tovlin kashar tevel. Now Rashi points out, even though if you don't separate, it doesn't make the rest of the meat tevel, so it doesn't really make it prohibited. Less or habasar b'achil, it doesn't make the meat prohibited in eating it. Miyuim lo pire shar habasar man. But nevertheless, if you don't separate the meat from them, harehu ochlan, he's going to end up eating it by mistake. V'over b'aseh, that already is going to be a transgression of an aseh. Hilkach haramasan hitiru v'lo halachasan. So therefore, again, they allowed you to separate the zroa, the lachayim, and the keva, but they didn't let you to bring it to the Kohen. The kulan mishum gezerah de'ein magbian osam. Now the Bach over here says de'ein magbian truma. All of this is a gezerah because you're not supposed to separate truma. So therefore, we make a gezerah over here as well. Even though you're allowed to separate, you shouldn't bring it to the Kohen. And so the Mishnah continues, and the Mishnah says, Amru lahem Beis Shammai. So Beis Shammai say to Beis Hillel, Gezeira Shava, we have the following Gezeira Shava. Now, it's not really a Gezeira Shava. Rashi says, Lav Dafka, it's not a real Gezeira Shava. The Kula Midrabanan Gazer, all this whole thing is all Derabbanans. Eladumia the Gezeira Shava Bidrabanan. But it's like a Gezeira Shava, like a comparison. It's a Derabbanan issue, and we'll make the following comparison. Beis Shammai is trying to make a comparison to support their argument that it's a problem to bring it to the Kohen. What's the Gezeira Shava? Chala umatanos matana lekohen. The Gezeira Shava is as follows: the Chala and the matanos of Zroa l'chayim and Keva, these are all gifts we give to the Kohen. Utruma matana lekohen, and Truma is also a gift that we give to the Kohen. Kishem shein molichin esa Truma kachein molichin esa matanos. Just like you're not allowed to bring Truma to the Kohen on Yontif, so too you can't bring this to the Kohen on Yontif. So Amru lahem Beis Hillel, so Beis Hillel say back to Beis Shammai, Loim amartim b'truma sheino zakai b'haramasa. You can't bring a proof because by truma you're not even allowed to separate the truma on Yontif. Tomer b'matanos shezakai b'haramasan, but it's different. By these matanos you're allowed to separate. Therefore, since you're allowed to separate, you're allowed to bring it to the Kohen as well. Rashi over here says matana l'kohen me'esrim v'arba matanos kunem. There are 24 different kinds of matanos we give to Kohanim, and these are from those. Keshem shein molichin devaham modisulan. Beis Shammai say to Beis Hillel, you agree that you're not allowed to bring truma, sharei me'esmol hug, because that was already separated yesterday. You certainly can't bring it today to the Kohen. So and then he said she'eno zakai. Beis Hillel say back, no, truma you're not, you don't merit, meaning rasha. You're not allowed to separate truma. Lo nasnu chachamim lo adam koach uzuchus ba'afrashas. It means to say, the Mishnah means to say, Beis Hillel means to say that the chacham do not allow you. They don't give you the strength and the merit to separate truma. That's why you're not allowed to bring it to the Kohen. But that's different in the case of these other matanos like chala and the zroa l'chayim and the keva. And so the Gemara says, Kasal Kadaitach, right now we think, Shahurmu mehayom v'shenishchetu mehayom. When it says in the Mishnah that you have a case over here where you separated it today on Yontif, it also means it was shechted today on Yontif. And even in that case, Beis Shammai say it's a problem. Even if the animal was shechted on Yontif, it's still going to be a problem to bring it to the Kohen. V'shahurmu meyamesh v'shenishchatu meyamesh. And also when it says in the Mishnah that it was separated from yesterday from before Yontif, it means that it was slaughtered, it was shechted from before Yontif. And so the Gemara says, Mani mas nisan. So who then is the author of our Mishnah? Lo Rabbi Yossi v'lo Rabbi Yehuda el acherim. It seems that it's not going to be Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yehuda in the Tosefta we're about to quote, but rather it's the acherim. The Tanyas we learned in a Bryce, again this is a Tosefta. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo ne'achliku Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel al matanos shehurmu me'erev Yontif. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel do not argue. If you have matanos that were separated from before Yontif, shemolichin im hamatanos shehurmu mehayom v'shenishchetu mehayom. You're allowed to take those matanos to the Kohen together with matanos that you have that were separated today and that the animal was shechted today. Lo ne'achliku ela laholichon b'fnei atzman. The only machlokus between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is, can you take them by itself? Meaning, if you have matanos that were separated from before Yontif and you're not taking them together with matanos from Yontif, can you take it by itself to the Kohen? So Beis Shammai omrim ein molichin and Beis Hillel omrim molichin. Beis Shammai say you can't take it. Beis Hillel say you could. V'kachayu Beis Shammai donin, and Beis Shammai had the following reasoning: Chalo umatanos matana lekohen, utruma matana lekohen. Chalo and matanos are their gifts to the Kohen, and so too truma is a gift to the Kohen. Kishem shein molichin es truma kachein molichin es matanos. Just like you can't take truma, so too you can't take matanos. Amru lehem Beis Hillel, and Beis Hillel say back to Beis Shammai, Lo memartim b'truma sheino zakai b'haramasa. You can't bring a proof from truma because truma you're not even allowed to separate. Tomer b'matanos shezakai b'haramasan. Whereas when it comes to the other matanos, you're allowed to separate. So what's the point over here? The point is that according to Rabbi Yehuda's understanding, if you have matanos that were hurmu mehayom and nishchetu mehayom, everybody agrees you're allowed to bring it to the Kohen. That's not an issue. The only issue was when it's from Erev Yontif. Now the problem is, again, that doesn't seem like our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah it says, Bein shehurmu meyemesh, bein shehurmu mehayom, and we're understanding hurmu mehayom means everything was done today. It was shechted today, and it was separated today, and Beis Shammai is saying it's a problem. So that goes against Rabbi Yehuda. That's why it doesn't seem like Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rabbi Yossi, and the Tosefta continues, Rabbi Yossi says, Lo nechligu Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al hamatanos shemolichin. Now, Rabbi Yossi is certainly not like our Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi says there is no machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel when it comes to other matanos besides truma. Certainly you can bring it to the Kohen. Again, that interpretation is definitely against our Mishnah. Lo nechligu el ala truma. The only machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is actually just by truma. Beis Shammai omrim ein molichin, and Beis Hillel omrim molichin. Beis Shammai say you can take truma to the Kohen on Yontiv, and Beis Hillel say you cannot. V'kach hayu Beis Hillel done, and Beis Hillel had the following reasoning: Chala umatanos matana lekohen, utruma matana lekohen. Chala and matanos are gifts to the Kohen, and so is truma. Kishem shemolichin es matanos, kach molichin es truma. Just like you can bring matanos to the Kohen, so too you can bring truma. Amru lahem Beis Shammai say back to Beis Hillel, lo im amartem b'matanos shezakai b'haramason. You can't bring a proof of matanos because you're allowed to separate them on yontif. Tomru b'truma, whereas by truma shein zakai b'haramason, you're not allowed to separate. Again, there's no doubt. Rashi says there's no doubt Rabbi Yossi does not fit with our Mishnah. The only question is going to be whether Rabbi Yehuda fits with our Mishnah. Acherim omrim. Now the Acherim say, this is the Tosefta continuing, Lo nechliku be'Shammai u Beis Hillel ala truma. There's no machlokas by truma she'ein molich, and everyone agrees you're not allowed to bring truma to the kohen on yontiv. Lo nechliku ela al hamatanos. The machlokas is by matanos. She'Beis Shammai omrim ein molichin u Beis Hillel omrim molichin. Beis Shammai say you cannot bring matanos. Beis Hillel say you could, and that seems the most like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says it's a straight up machlokas. Doesn't matter when it was separated, whether it was yesterday, whether it was today. That's the machlokas across the board. There's a machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Can you bring matanos to the kohen? That's why the Gemara thinks leima acherim hi v'lo Rabbi Yehuda. Let us now say that the Mishnah is the acherim and cannot be Rabbi Yehuda. That's the point of the Gemara. It cannot be Rabbi Yehuda because Rabbi Yehuda says that if it's from today, then you are allowed. According to everyone, you can bring it to the kohen. So the Gemara says, no, it's not necessarily true. It could be that Rabbi Yehuda fits with our Mishnah as well. Amar Rava says, Rava, mi kotani shehurmu mehayom v'shenishchetu mehayom. It doesn't say in our Mishnah that the case is that it was separated today and shechted today. Shehurmu kotani. It just says it was separated today on Yontif. Uliolam shchitasan meyemesh. And it could very well be that our Mishnah means that if it was shechted from before Yontif, then there's a machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. In other words, Beis Shammai say that if the animal was shechted before Yontif, so then you shouldn't bring the matanos to the kohen on Yontif. But it could very well be that if the animal was shechted on Yontif, like Rabbi Yehuda says in the Tosefta, so in that case, maybe Beis Shammai would be lenient, and maybe Rabbi Yehuda would be consistent with our Mishnah. But now the Gemara goes the other direction. Leima Rabbi Yehuda v'lo acherim. Well, maybe if that's your logic, maybe we should say the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda and cannot be the acherim. As Rashi over here says, Leima Rabbi Yehuda v'lo acherim keved demasnisin davka b'deshel emesh koi. Because if you look at our Mishnah, what is it really saying? It's saying it has to be from yesterday, meaning midolo katani nishchetu hayom. It doesn't say it was shechted today. You're right. Let's take that diuk seriously and say that the implication is the Mishnah is talking specifically when it was shechted before Yontif, and that's where Beis Shammai say it's a problem, and we can make a diuk that if it was shechted on Yontif, Beis Shammai would agree. Nemo de loga acherim do acherim ala matanos kamri. Right, so that would seem to say, according to that it's Rabbi Yehuda and not the acherim, because our Mishnah is saying only if it was shechted yesterday is there a machlokas, and Beis Shammai is strict, and the acherim say that's not true. The Beis Shammai say on all matanos, according to the acherim, Beis Shammai say on all matanos it's a problem. So let us say that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, not the acherim. So the Gemara says, no, maybe not. You could very well say that the acherim, the Gemara here is fundamentally saying that the acherim basically agree with Rabbi Yehuda. And when the acherim say that on all matanos there's a machlok, it's not really all matanos. It's all matanos that were shechted from yesterday. But again, if it was shechted today, maybe even the acherim agree that it's mutter according to Beis Shammai. As Rashi over here says, "B'hanoch denishchetu meyamesh al hamatanos teko amri." When it says they argue about matanos, the kamri acherim, when the acherim say they argue about all matanos, it doesn't mean all matanos. It means b'shalamesh kamayri. It means that if it was shechted yesterday, they argue about the following matanos, and so therefore it could still be the acherim as well. In other words, our Mishnah is talking about where it was shechted yesterday. Rabbi Yehuda is talking about where it was shechted yesterday. The acherim are talking about where it's shechted yesterday. Everybody agrees on all of these points. Therefore, our Mishnah could be Rabbi Yehuda or the acherim. Everyone agrees if it was shechted today on Yontiv, everyone would agree it would be mutter. Even Beis Shammai would say it would be mutter. The Gemara, though, asks the obvious question: Ihachi hainu Rabbi Yehuda. If that's the case, you've just made the acherim identical to Rabbi Yehuda. They're in the same Tosefta. They seem to be arguing. But here, both Rabbi Yehuda and the acherim are saying that the machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is when it was shechted from before Yontiv. So the Gemara says, Ika beinayu tefela. No, there is a difference between them. They're arguing about, are you allowed to bring them along with other matanos? As Rashi over here says, tefela, meaning to accompany. Rabbi Yehuda matir letafil leholech shel emesh im shel hayom. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said in the Tosefta. You can take the ones from yesterday. If you have ones from today that you're taking to the Kohen anyway, you can take ones from yesterday together with them. The acherim savri, the other ones hold no. The afilu letafil nami asri Beis Shammai. Even if you're taking with other ones, Beis Shammai would say it's a problem. umasnistin de lo ayri b'tfeila klal. Now our Mishnah doesn't deal with taking it with other ones at all anyways, so ikol amemra kareb Yehuda, v'ikol amemra kachem. You can very well say our Mishnah follows Reb Yehuda, you can say it follows the Achem. It's not getting involved in the issue of tefillah. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Some Reb Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Reb Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, halacha kareb Yosi. The halacha is like Reb Yosi. Rashi over here says, halacha kareb Yosi. This is Reb Yosi in the Tosefta we just quoted. V'aliba de Beis Hillel, meaning we follow Reb Yosi according to Beis Hillel. Tiafilu truma nami mutar laholach. Because according to Reb Yosi, the machlokas was by truma. It would come out then, according to Beis Hillel, that even truma you're allowed to bring to the Kohen on Yontiv. That's the halacha. We can be lenient and bring truma to the Kohen on Yontiv. And the Gemara continues, Rav Tuvi, brother of Nechemia. Rav Tuvi, the son of Rav Nechemia, Havale Garba de Chamra de Truma. He had a bottle of wine of truma. Also Lakami de Rav Yosef, and he came before Rav Yosef. Amarle, he said to him, Ma'olam tuye lekohen hoina. Can I bring it to the Kohen right now on Yontiv? Amarle, so he said to him, Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel. So says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. Halacha ke Rav Yosi. Halacha is like Rav Yosi. You're allowed to bring the truma to the Kohen on Yontiv. Ushbezichne de Rava bar Rav Chanan, the host of Rava bar Rav Chanan, Havule Isuraisa de Chardel. Rashi over here says Isuraisa Chavilos shel Chardel. He had bundles of mustard. It was basically unprocessed mustard. B'sharvitin va'azera b'sochan. Right, they're in their husks. You have the seeds inside. It's unprocessed mustard that he had. That this host had. So Amar Le. So he said to Rava bar Rav Chanan, Ma'u lefuruche umechel minayu b'yontif. Rashi over here says, Ma'u lefruche hasharvitin. He wants to take the husks and kind of and break them down. Ulhotzi hazera b'yontiv. He wants to take out the seed on yontiv. He wants to take out the mustard seeds. Mishari b'yontiv kishchita ukebishel. Is that permitted on yontiv? Just like you're allowed to shecht animals on yontiv, you're allowed to cook on yontiv. Oh, Dilmor, maybe kevon de efsher me erev yontiv lo. Maybe since this was something he could have done before Yontiv, maybe that's a problem. The toldas disha, this would be a told of disha, a told of threshing. So he wanted to know, is this permitted on Yontiv? So lahava biyade, he didn't have the answer to the question, meaning Rava bar Rav Chanan did not have the answer. So asalakame de Rava, so he came before Rava. Amar le, he said to him, Molalin malilos umefarchin kitnios biyontiv. Rashi over here says, Molin malilos is basically you use the fingers to do this kind of threshing, to break apart the kernels. The dosh kilachar yadu. That's dosh, but it's kilachar yad. You're doing it in the not normal fashion. V'afilu b'Shabbos lav doraisa. Even on Shabbos, it's not a doraisa. El midrabanan, it's only a problem midrabanan to do it that way. Uv'yomtiv lo gazer. On Yontiv, it's not a problem, so you're allowed to do that. Mefarchin kitnios is similar. That's you do the same thing by legumes. You're allowed to do this on Yontiv. So the Gemara now says, Eisvei Abai. So Abai has the following. We'll read one more. Rashi actually, Melilos Shalchitin. What we're talking about over here is you're breaking apart the kernels, talking about wheat. Shemolel biyod of Kashen Rachim. When they're a little soft, you roll it in your fingers, in your hands, and again, that kind of breaks it apart. This is a told of Dash. But the Gemara now continues, Eisvei Abai. So Abai has the following question. Hamolel melilos me'erev Shabbos. It says again, let's say you did this to the wheat. You broke apart the kernels on erev Shabbos. You did it before Shabbos. So lemachar the next day minafeach miyad liyad. Now you want to separate the good part from the bad part, almost like what you do with a sieve. So you can do that using your hand, v'yochel, and you can eat it that way. Or aval, that you're allowed to do. Avalo bekinon v'lo b'tamchoy. But you're not allowed to do it with like a plate or something like that. You're not allowed to separate in that fashion on Shabbos. And hamola melilos me'erev yontiv. Now let's say you did this me'erev yontiv. You crushed up the kernels to extract the good parts. So lemachar minafeach al yad. Again, you're allowed to separate the good from the bad the next day on yontiv using your hands. V'yochel afilu bekinon v'afilu betamchoy. And you can do it even with like a kind of a tray or a plate. Avalo betavalo v'lo benafa v'lo bekvar. But you can't do the sifting with a tablet or a sieve, something like that already. You're not allowed to do. Rashi over here says, Miyad liyad shalo kederachol. You're doing the separation of the good from the bad with your hands. That's not the normal way. Kinon, what's kinon? Again, kinon was something you were not allowed to use on Shabbos, but you could use on Yontiv. So klihu rosho echad racha v'asheni asoy kein marzev katzer. Basically, it's a kli which is wider on the top, and then it gets narrower, almost like a gutter, so to speak. V'nosin hakitnios besoch harachav. You put the legumes up in the wider parts. Uminaneh, you shake it around. Va'ochel miskalgel derech hamarzev v'apsolas nishar bekli. And then the the food part, that rolls in through the pipe, so to speak, and the part that's bad, that remains in the top, and the wider part in the kli. So it's a way of basically sifting. Tamchoy is a ka'ora gedola. Tamchoy is you're going to use a large plate in order to separate. Al yad. So then again, it said that if you do it on yontiv, so you can separate al yad. Al yad means ma'at. You can do it little by little and eat. In other words, separate a little at a time and eat as you're separating. And the point was that's al yad. Al yad is not the same as miyad liyad. Miyad liyad means you're using your hands to separate. Al yad means you're doing it slowly, but even with a kinan tamchoy is okay. That's okay if you're doing it on yontiv. Avalo b'tavla, but to use a tablet or a sieve, that's a problem. The mechsi command to avid letzorach machar. The problem using those utensils is it looks like you're doing a lot. You're doing it for tomorrow. Shein derech lasos b'kelim halalo alaharbe. Those kind of kelim you use for a lot. So the point is that the heter on yontiv is to do it al yad, to do it a little bit at a time, and not to do a lot. That's why you can't use the tavla and the naf and the kvara. But in any case, the Gemara says like this: Me'erev yontiv in b'yontiv lo. What does it say very clearly over here? Hamolel malilos me'erev yontiv. You're doing the part that's the threshing part. You're doing me'erev yontiv. Apparently, you're not allowed to do that on yontiv. Me'erev yontiv in, but b'yontiv it's a problem. Me'erev yontiv it's okay, but b'yontiv it's a problem. Rashi over here says me'erev yontiv in hamolel me'erev yontiv katani v'lo katani hamolel b'yontiv. Apparently, you're not allowed to be molel on yontiv. That's a direct contradiction to what Rava just said. Rava said molel and malilos u'mefarchen kitnios b'yontiv. So what's going on over here? So the Gemara says, afilu tema b'yontif. No, you could even say that really you're allowed to be molil malilos on yontif. Ve'aidi detana reisha me'erev Shabbos. The reason is like this. Since the beginning over here it said molil malilos me'erev Shabbos, certainly you're not allowed to be molil malilos on Shabbos. So use the language of erev Shabbos, which is true. So tana seifa nami me'erev yontif. That's why the end of the brisa said me'erev yontif, even though it doesn't have to be me'erev yontif. You can be molil malilos on yontif, but we kept the language the same. We said me'erev yontif. In any case, the Gemara continues, Imkain, if so, Motzinu Truma Shazakai Baharamasa. If this is what you're doing here on Yontif, aren't you separating Truma and Yontif as well? Rashi over here says, Imkain de Molil in Malilos b'Yontif. If you're actually being Molil in the Malilos on Yontif, you're actually doing the threshing part on Yontif. So Motzinu Truma Shazakai Baharamasa, it's going to come out, you'll have to separate Truma as well on Yontif. To Stam Shibolin Lo Mafrishin Truma, because when you have stalks, you generally can't separate Truma at that point. Achayasu Dagan, you have to make it into grain. That's the process of molilin. V'hamolin b'yontiv la'achlan mafresh man truma al karchos. So if you're going to be molil on yontiv, if that's your explanation of this brisa, then aren't you going to have to separate truma as well? So then it's going to be that you're separating truma on yontiv. Utanana, what do we say in our Mishnah? Lo mamartim b'truma sheno zakai b'haramas. It said everyone agrees by truma you're not allowed to separate truma on yontiv, v'chulu, etc. And so the Gemara answers, Lo kasha, it's not difficult, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph.